Hello, everyone. My name is Julia, and I am on the communications team of the Feldenkrais Guild. And I'm really excited to introduce Donna Ray. She's a well-known name in the Feldenkrais world. She's a practitioner, a trainer, has years of experience. And what's interesting to this month's topic is that she has a series on sexuality and Feldenkrais method. So that's part of why I was really interested in speaking to her. So welcome, Donna. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Julia.
And my first question is, what drew you to creating this series on sexuality and Feldenkrais method?
Well, along with being a Feldenkrais practitioner, trainer, and now educational director, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. And in the beginning of my training as a psychotherapist, I attended many seminars on human sexuality so that I could better counsel couples and families. And that was a very long time ago. That was in the 80s. So in the 80s, there was a revolution about human sexuality, and people like Dr. Barback and others were giving seminars about not only sexuality in general, but women's sexuality. So I was introduced to this idea that sexuality is an important aspect of being a human being. And as we know, Dr. Feldenkrais talked about sexuality. It's in the title of the book, Body and Mature Behavior. In The Potent Self, he talks very specifically about human sexuality and presents us a case study. So my interest goes, far back into my early training. And then being part of the Feldenkrais community in training programs, one of the comments that people often make during their training program is, wow, my sexuality has become much better. I feel so much more alive and responsive. And people often whisper in the back of the room, it's like, is that happening to you too? Is that happening to you too? It's rare that people raise their hand and make a report, but I think it's worth noting that sexuality is a profound part of our functioning, and we can talk about it directly.
Thank you. And in your experience, are there any specific lessons or strategies using Feldenkrais method that you found were effective in sort of deepening sexuality, discovering more about yourself in that way?
So many lessons. Probably all of our lessons make a difference because you're integrating your whole self, as you know, and you're spreading your attention far and wide. You're increasing your sensations throughout your whole self, and you're learning how to pay attention to details, probably in ways that you've never paid attention to before. So, people often think about the pelvic clock as a way to enrich the sensations of the pelvis and sexuality. And I think having a free movement of your pelvis, your spine, your head, your whole self, basically. But, that's a very nice way to imagine that we can make a difference for people. So I just took it a step further in the lessons that I developed so that I have people actually contract and let go of the muscles of the pelvic floor. So that brings more awareness to the pelvic floor muscles. And that area, so to speak, of the body, I don't even like to use terms like that. It's like awareness of self, really, is sometimes left out for people, and it's in our language, we talk about our genitals, our sexuality is like that place down there. We don't even have words sometimes to describe our sexual parts. So when you go about it in a more indirect but kind of direct way and ask people to notice their breathing, to tilt their pelvis, and to contract and expand the pelvic floor muscles, they become much more aware of those aspects, and sensations that they can enjoy. Now, another way to do that is to, especially for women, because incontinence can be an issue for women, and especially after you have a baby, but doesn't have to be related to delivering a baby, is that the muscles of the pelvic floor, they sometimes are not responding in the way that they were before pregnancy. So by contracting and expanding the pelvic floor muscles, you can also bring vitality to your genitals. But I've worked with men too, and men also really benefit from contracting and expanding the pelvic floor muscles. And it actually contributes to more sexual control for both men and women and orgasmic potential.
Yeah, everyone wants to have a better orgasm. So do you think Feldenkrais method can improve that for people?
Well, I think so, because the Feldenkrais method actually trains us to self-regulate. So to have an orgasmic response, the autonomic nervous system needs to be balanced. So we need to be able to move from the sympathetic to the parasympathetic, being highly aroused. There are a certain amount of muscle tension, but then we have to relax. And so sexual arousal is a combination of knowing how to tense and relax, actually, and to move, within that whole spectrum. And then to spread out awareness of sensation. So when, speaking to people very specifically about orgasm or having difficulties with orgasmic potential, sometimes they're really focusing on a part. It becomes very, very localized. And instead of localization, spreading out sensuality and sensuality so that they're really enjoying the movement of their own self. And as you know, we can do this alone. We can do awareness through movement alone. And when I'm working with couples, I often ask them to do the lessons that I have created together so that they have time to connect and move and breathe, relax. And it gives them a way to talk about their preferences. So that leads me to another aspect of the Feldenkrais method that's very unique. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, and that's being able to identify preferences. So, in early human sexuality training, one of the things that we would do is train couples so that they would be able to say what kind of touch they enjoyed. So firm touch, a light touch, a caress, and some people like firm, some people want light. There's a huge range of preferences, but many people really don't know what they prefer. They haven't spent the time with their own sensuality to know what their preferences are. So we can do that with the Feldenkrais method, as you know.
Or even maybe be able to say it to another person, right? That's a whole other thing that I appreciate about Feldenkrais method, is that ability to really know what you want.
Yes, and what you're saying is that you have to know what you want to be able to communicate it to another person. And many people really don't know what they want. They don't know their preferences. They don't really know themselves from this movement sensuality perspective.
Yeah. Wow. That's a big topic. It probably takes years. But what came to my mind is, we as Feldenkrais practitioners, we take 4 years to refine our touch and sensitivity of our touch in our hands. And I wonder if that would be a helpful part of one's education, and to improve their sexuality as well, sensuality as well, that feeling of touch.
Definitely. And over the years, I've taught many workshops for couples and individuals on just that, to do a combination of awareness through movement lessons and then self-touch, that we do in our lessons, and then with partners. And in some case, they're individuals partnering up with others, and sometimes, with couples. But understanding how to increase pressure, reduce pressure, and refine touch is it's such a large playground, for people to enter into. And when you help people discover what their preferences are and to communicate them, it's like their world expands non-judgmentally. And that is so important because, if you're in the middle of anything for that matter, but, if you're making love with somebody and you say, don't do that, or, you're critical or judgmental, it's startling and it often breaks the flow, it breaks the connection. So people can learn how to say, I would, prefer to have a little bit lighter touch, or you could make that a little bit more firm, or move a little bit to the right or to the left. It's like, you can give direction without interrupting the flow, and that becomes part of an enhanced sexual life.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you use the word playground, and I associate that playfulness with sensuality and sexuality. I mean, it's wider than just sex, right? It's like permeating your whole life in a way, right? That playfulness. So did you notice that people who take your classes or work with you kind of become more playful in their life?
Well, many people say that after doing workshops or taking trainings or doing an intensive Feldenkrais workshop for a couple of days, things open up for them. They want to learn new things. They become more physically active. They feel more confident because they feel more stable, more balanced. We change how we see, and, balancing the head and the eyes and the neck. I mean, everything's always changing. I love the image of we become much more like, earthquake proof buildings. And since I live in Southern California, that makes a lot of sense to me. But, if you're adapting all the time to what you're doing and flowing and moving with it, yeah, you feel so much more at ease in yourself.
Wonderful. Well, another question I have, it's related to sexuality and aging. It seems to be quite a challenge for some people as they age to still have that full range of sexuality and not to kind of close in. So what is your opinion about how to maintain full and potent life as one ages?
Mhm. Well, of course, I think practicing the Feldenkrais method gives us that potential and possibility because we can move freely and we feel very alive and vital physically and sensually. And like I said, with a sense of confidence in ourselves. And I have a wonderful story to tell about that. I had a student that was coming to me for years for individual Feldenkrais lessons, on and off for years. And when she was in her 80s, I happened to sit next to her on an airplane. And we turned to each other and went, I know you. And we started chatting. And I said, what are you doing? We were both flying to San Diego from Northern California. And she said, I was visiting my boyfriend. I said, that's marvelous. And she said, you wouldn't have known, but my husband passed away many years ago. And I've been seeing this wonderful man. And she said, it's extraordinary, really, at my age to have this kind of love and sensuality. And I said, oh my gosh, thank you for sharing that. And of course, we had known each other. And so she was freely speaking to me. And she said, the only problem is sometimes I get honeymoon cystitis, which is something that young people, they get. It's just some irritation basically from having sex. And so she was laughing about that. And then a few years later, she started seeing me again in my private practice. And she said, I just want to make sure that I can do everything, and the doctor said maybe I shouldn't be having sex because I might hurt my spine. I have osteoporosis. And I said, well, what do you think about that? And she said, I think it's nonsense. And I said, well, what positions are you comfortable in? And she was lying on her back and she threw her legs up with her knees to her chest. And I said, are you comfortable? And she goes, oh yeah, I'm fine. And sometimes we lay on the side too. And she was laughing. I mean, so this woman now is in her 90s.
Wow.
And this is what she was sharing with me. So, anything is possible. And I recently read an article saying that women in their 60s have greater orgasmic potential, that they have full body orgasm. So, you know, men and women alike can continue enjoying sexuality through their lifespans if that's important to them.
Yeah. And some people are asexual, that's normal too. But yeah, if they want to, I think it should be explored in as many ways as possible. Um, and then I'm curious, have you worked with people with sexual dysfunctions that you were able to help?
Over the years, I've worked with many people with difficulties, and you know, as you know, in the Feldenkrais method, we don't treat problems. We work with enhancing functioning of all kinds. So that's the direction that I go in the conversation with people, is really understanding them and understanding what they would like and how their lives would be different. And then understanding how they can navigate, you know, sexuality within themselves and with their partners so that they overcome the challenges that they're facing.
Hmm. And it's been quite effective, it seems like.
Yeah, very much so.
Mhm.
Because I mean, sexuality rests on what we're speaking about, understanding oneself, feeling comfortable with oneself and sensuality and sexuality, and then being able to share that with another person. So, trust, attunement, communication, all of those aspects are they are of equal importance, you know, when it comes to sexuality.
Yes. And before we finish this interview, I just wanted to see if you have any last parting advice or tips for our listeners and viewers, just anything that you think would enrich their lives.
Well, if they're interested in enhancing their sensuality and sexuality, I say practice the Feldenkrais method. I have, as I said, I have a 3-lesson series on my website, donnaray.com, and I'm going to post one of those lessons with you on SenseAbility. Also, finding a practitioner that you really trust and can speak freely with about sensuality or sexuality or whatever it is that you would like to understand better about yourself. Because we can look at all of these things as habits. And we know that in the Feldenkrais method, we work with the detail, we work with the nervous system to challenge our habits so that we can open doors and behave in new and different ways. So find a trustworthy practitioner. I have a class on Monday evenings at 5 p.m. PST, and that's open to the public as well. We have a little discussion time too. So Zoom classes are so available now to people in the Feldenkrais method. So if you have any questions for me, feel free to send me an email or leave a text even on my phone. And I look forward to being in contact with you more, Yulia, and our audience.
Thank you so much, Donna. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.